Before we begin, if stories like this move you, if you believe in love that survives loss and families built from ashes, hit that subscribe button. Every story we tell is for you. Now let's go back to the Arizona territory, 1886, to a man who had almost stopped fighting. The woman who rode in from the horizon. A widowed rancher's last hope arrives in 5 words. Night 180. The ledger sat open on the kitchen table, its columns of numbers blurring in the lamplight. Jackson Thorne had been staring at it for an hour, not reading it, not really, just using the act of looking at something to keep himself from looking at nothing. His eyes were the color of old iron, and they carried that particular flatness that comes not from cruelty, but from exhaustion so deep it had become its own kind of country. A place you could live in. A place that felt, after long enough, almost like home. Upstairs, little Lily was crying. She was always crying. Not the explosive, violent crying of a child in pain, but the steady, low sound of a child who has simply learned that crying is the natural state of existence. 11 months old, blue eyes like her mother's. Blonde hair that curled at the temples when it was damp with tears, which was most of the time. 180 nights. Jackson pulled his watch from his vest pocket, a habit now meaningless since he had stopped sleeping at any predictable hour, and read the time without registering it. He set it down beside the ledger, picked up the folded piece of paper that lay next to it, read it again though he had it memorized by now. Mr. Thorne, I am sorry, I cannot stay. The isolation is too much for any person. God bless you and the child. E. Whitfield. 47 people in 6 months, each one arriving with some combination of optimism, pity, or financial desperation, each one leaving. The widow from Prescott who declared Lily possessed, the young Mexican woman who heard ghosts in the walls, the capable Ruth Freeman who needed $15 a month when Jackson could only pay $8, and then the rest a blur of faces and excuses and the sound of hoofbeats fading down the road. 47 people. And now E. Whitfield, whoever he had been making 48 if you counted the resignation note. Jackson did count it. He counted everything. Numbers were one of the last things that still made sense. He closed the ledger. There was something wrong with it. He had noticed it 3 nights ago, sitting in this same chair, in this same yellow light with Lily crying above him, and the Arizona darkness pressing against the windows like something that wanted in. The numbers didn't add up. Not dramatically wrong, not the kind of discrepancy that announced itself, but wrong in the careful, quiet way of someone who knew what they were doing. 3 head of cattle sold in October that Jackson had no memory of selling. A payment received from a buyer he had never heard of. Small amounts, almost invisible. Almost. He had meant to look into it. He kept meaning to look into it. But Lily cried and the fence needed mending and the horses needed feeding and the days went by the way days do when you are no longer living them, but simply surviving them one after another, each one a small defeat. The cabin stood 20 miles north of Prescott, Arizona territory on land Jackson had claimed 12 years ago, with nothing but a deed, 2 horses, and Margaret Ann Chambers, who had laughed at the emptiness and said, "We'll fill it up." They had filled it up slowly the way good things are built, with argument and compromise, and long silences that meant nothing, except that 2 people were comfortable enough not to fill every moment with words, with a barn that took all of one summer to raise, with a herd that grew from 12 head to 60, with a kitchen garden that Maggie coaxed into existence through sheer force of will because she was from Boston and had no business growing anything in Arizona soil, and did it anyway because no one had told her she couldn't. With Lily, who arrived in February of 1885 squalling and perfect and already stubborn, with 6 years of a life that had felt on its good days like exactly what life was supposed to feel like. Then March of 1886, and then nothing was the same again. Jackson stood up from the table. His boots were loud on the floorboards. He had never noticed before. How loud his footsteps were had never had occasion to, because before there had always been other sounds to fill the house. Maggie's voice. Maggie singing soft and slightly off-key, which she did when she thought he wasn't listening. The particular creak of the rocking chair when she sat in it to nurse Lily. Now there was only his footsteps and Lily crying and the wind. He climbed the stairs. Lily's room was the smaller of the 2 bedrooms, the one that faced east, so the morning light would come in first. Jackson had built the crib himself, sanding it smooth until there were no rough edges that could catch a small hand. He remembered the satisfaction of that, the pure, simple pride of a thing made well. He remembered Maggie running her fingers along the rails and saying, "Jackson, it's beautiful," and meaning it. He lifted Lily from the crib. She was warm and damp with tears. Her small fists clenched her face that particular shade of red that meant she had been crying for a while. She didn't stop when he picked her up. That was the thing he had never quite been able to accept, even after 180 nights of it. Other babies stopped crying when their fathers picked them up. Lily just kept going, as if she could tell even in her infant certainty that the arms holding her were not the arms she needed. As if she knew. "Hey, sweetheart." His voice came out rougher than he intended. "I've got you," she cried. He walked. That was the only thing that helped, even slightly movement, the rhythm of steps. The sense of going somewhere, even when you were just circling the same small room. He walked and she cried, and outside the Arizona stars were indifferent and beautiful and very far away. At some point, he didn't know when he found himself at the window looking east. The mountains were black shapes against a sky that had gone from absolute dark to the faint gray of approaching morning. He had lost another night. He didn't remember losing it. Lily had gone quieter, not silent. She rarely went fully silent. But the crying had softened into something more like a complaint, a running commentary on the general unfairness of existence. Jackson pressed his face briefly against her soft hair. "I don't know what I'm doing," he told her. It was the most honest thing he had said in months. "I don't know how to do this alone." She made a sound that might have been a response, or might have been just the random noise of an 11-month-old processing the world. He kept walking. He kept watching the eastern horizon. He was still there, still standing when the sun began to clear the mountains, when the light came in thin and golden through the window, painting the floorboards, catching the dust motes, making the small room briefly painfully beautiful. And that was when he saw it. A shape against the light, a rider coming from the east moving slowly across the flat desert plain toward the cabin. Jackson's hand moved before his mind caught up with it, the old cavalry reflex fingers going for the Colt revolver on the hook beside the door. He strapped it on with one hand, still holding Lily with the other. Nobody came this far without reason, and reasons out here were rarely simple. He went outside onto the porch. The morning air was sharp with the smell of sage and cold earth, the particular freshness of the desert before the heat of the day burned it away. Lily had gone completely still in his arms, unusual enough that Jackson glanced down at her, half expecting to find her asleep. But she wasn't asleep. Her eyes were open, fixed on the horizon, tracking the approaching rider with an attention she rarely gave to anything. He looked back up. The rider drew closer, and details emerged from the morning haze. A woman. Long black hair tied back from her face, loose strands catching the breeze. Clothes made from animal hide, decorated with patterns Jackson recognized, and after a moment, as Apache-work geometric shapes in red and black worn, with the easy unself-consciousness of someone who had never dressed to impress anyone but herself. She rode an Appaloosa, a spotted horse with a deep chest and long legs moving with the smooth efficiency of an animal that had covered a great deal of ground and expected to cover a great deal more. The woman sat straight in the saddle, eyes forward, no hesitation, no scanning of the property in the way of someone uncertain of their welcome. She rode as if she had been here before, or as if she had decided somewhere back along the road that she was coming, regardless of what she found. She stopped her horse 10 feet from the porch steps. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The Appaloosa blew a soft breath. Lily made no sound. Then the woman said 5 words. "Now I am here." Just that. No greeting, no explanation, no apology for the hour. 5 words that landed in Jackson's chest with a weight entirely out of proportion to their size. He found his voice. It came out with more suspicion than he intended, but suspicion was the only armor he had left. "Who are you? What do you want?" "My name is Ayana Nishoba." Her English was clear and precise, each word placed carefully like someone who had learned the language as a tool and used it with full awareness of what it could and couldn't carry. "I heard about a man raising a child alone, a child who needs someone." A pause. "I think you need someone too." "You heard from who?" "From the wind, from the road, from people who talk when they think no one is listening." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I can't pay much. The work is hard. The isolation is harder. 47 people have come through here. Every single one of them left." Something moved in her face, not quite a smile, not quite a judgment, an acknowledgement perhaps. "I heard that too." She dismounted in one smooth motion. The way she did it, the ease, the economy of movement, not a single gesture wasted, made Jackson think of someone who had been getting on and off horses since before she could walk. She walked toward the porch and stopped at the bottom step. Her eyes moved to Lily. "May I see her?" Every instinct said no. Every instinct said, keep your daughter close. Trust no one. You have learned this the hard way. 47 lessons in the cost of trust. Jackson had learned them all. But something in this woman's gaze made him hesitate. Something ancient and still like water at the bottom of a deep well. She was not looking at Lily the way strangers looked at babies, with that cooing performance of delight that babies seemed to see through immediately. She was simply looking, waiting. He turned Lily slightly so she could see the woman's face. What happened next, Jackson would spend a long time afterward trying to explain to himself and failing. Lily stopped crying. Not gradually, not the slow tapering off of a child whose distress was easing. She simply stopped. Her small body went still. Those blue eyes that had held nothing but tears for 6 months fixed on Ayana's face with an intensity that Jackson had never seen from his daughter before. And then, impossibly incomprehensibly, Lily reached out her hand. Her tiny fingers stretched toward the stranger at the bottom of the steps, grasping at air. Jackson's heart stopped. In 6 months, through 47 strangers, Lily had never done this, not once. She had screamed at every new face, buried herself against Jackson's chest, refused to be held by anyone who was not her father. But now she was reaching, stretching toward this woman she had never seen before with the certainty of someone who recognized what they had found. Ayana did not smile. She did not make the cooing sounds women made around babies. She simply nodded a small, serious acknowledgement, as if she and Lily had just agreed on something in a language only they could hear. She knows, Ayana said quietly. Children always know who means them harm and who does not. Jackson stood there with his daughter reaching for a stranger and felt something shift inside him. Not trust, not yet, not anything that simple. But the beginning of the possibility of trust. A crack in the wall he had built. Would you like to come inside? His voice came out softer than he intended. Have some water. Your horse looks like it could use rest. Ayana inclined her head. Thank you, we have traveled far. Jackson led the Appaloosa to the barn. When he came back, he found Ayana on the porch, still holding Lily's gaze across the distance between them. The baby had not made a sound. Inside, Ayana set Lily down in the crib near the kitchen. The baby watched her with those wide blue eyes, curious and calm without a single protest. Jackson stood by the stove and looked at his kitchen for the first time in weeks as something other than a place he had to move through. He saw it the way a stranger would see it. The dishes piled 4 days deep in the basin, the dust on every surface, the smell of a house where meals had been eaten, standing up over the sink, where sleep had happened in snatches on whatever surface was closest, where the basic business of maintaining a home had given way entirely to the basic business of survival. He felt for the first time in months something close to shame. Ayana looked around without judgment. Her eyes moved across the chaos the way a person reads a map, taking in information, building a picture. Then, without a word, she rolled up her sleeves and began washing the dishes. You don't have to do that, Jackson said. Busy hands make for a quiet mind. She didn't look up. I find peace in simple work. She worked with the same economy she brought to everything. No wasted motion, no complaint about the state of the dishes or the temperature of the water. While she worked, she reached into a small leather pouch at her belt and removed dried herbs, chamomile, and cedar. Jackson recognized the smell and made a tea with water from the kettle, letting it steep until it was cool enough. She offered it to Lily in a small cup. The baby drank without protest. Jackson stared. 47 people, he said, hearing the amazement in his own voice. Not one of them could get her to drink anything without a fight. Ayana looked at him with those dark, knowing eyes. Because they tried to force her. Children feel the truth beneath words. When you fight them, they fight back. When you offer peace, they accept it. Jackson laughed. The sound startled him. It came out rough and unfamiliar, like a door opening on hinges that had gone stiff with disuse. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed. Couldn't remember what it felt like. I've been avoiding those dishes for 5 days, he admitted. You did them in 5 minutes. The corners of Ayana's mouth curved the smallest possible movement, barely a smile. Good strategy. Wait long enough, perhaps they wash themselves. The dry humor caught him completely off guard. He laughed again, and this time it felt a little more natural, a little more like something that belonged to him. That first day he watched her. He couldn't help it. She moved through his home with a quiet efficiency that was nothing like the careful performance of the helpers who had come before, the ones who were always conscious of being watched, always doing things for his benefit, always slightly performing competence. Ayana did not perform anything. She simply worked. Perimeter of the house with the unhurried perimeter of the house, with the unhurried attention of someone cataloging a landscape, noting where the wood was rotting and where the roof overhang left the porch exposed to rain. She did none of these things loudly. She did not report to him. She simply gathered information in silence. Lily followed her with those blue eyes wherever she went. Late in the afternoon, as the sun painted the western sky in shades of amber, and Rose, Ayana stood at the kitchen window looking out over the land. Jackson stood at the table with his coffee, watching her look at it. "This is good earth," she said. "Water nearby. Mountains protect from the north." "You chose well." "Maggie chose it," Jackson said. "I just did what she told me." A pause. "She sounds like a woman who knew what she wanted. She knew what she wanted before she knew what she wanted." He looked into his coffee. "That was Maggie. She'd decide something was right before she could explain why, and then she'd be proven right, and she'd never say 'I told you so' because she didn't need to. She already knew." Silence. The comfortable kind which surprised him. "Do you have family?" he asked, then immediately wanted to take it back. It was too personal for the first day, too direct. But Ayana answered simply, "I did once, not anymore." The words carried weight, a whole story compressed into 4 syllables. Jackson didn't push. He recognized that tone. He had used it himself the past 6 months when people asked about Maggie. They sat in comfortable quiet as the light faded and the first stars appeared. Lily slept in the crib nearby, making the small sounds of a sleeping child, peaceful sounds that Jackson had almost forgotten existed. That night, for the first time in 180 nights, Lily slept until dawn. The ledger! Jackson lay awake for most of that night. The silence was too strange. He kept waiting for it to break, kept listening for the cry that had become the background note of his existence, the sound against which all other sounds were measured. But the house stayed quiet, and in the quiet his mind went places it had been avoiding. He thought about Maggie, about her last words. Find her. Find Ayana for Lily. He had tried. God knows he had tried. But the name had gone nowhere, had bounced off closed doors in 3 towns, had returned to him empty and useless. And then the days had piled up, and the helpers had come and gone, and the silver in his pocket had dwindled, and the fence had needed mending, and Lily had cried by him and cried, and he had stopped trying. The thought of the ledger came to him in the silence. He got up. It was on the kitchen table where he had left it. He carried it to the lamp, opened it, and looked again at the numbers that didn't add up. 3 head of cattle sold in October. A payment from a buyer called H. Crane and Associates, a name that meant nothing to him. $42, not enough to matter in theory, but it mattered because he hadn't done it, which meant someone else had. He sat with that for a while. 47 people had come through this house. Any one of them could have had access to his cattle, his property, his movements. He thought about the ones who had lasted longest, Ruth Freeman, who had been genuinely kind and genuinely unable to stay. The young man from Tucson who had worked the cattle for 2 weeks before disappearing. The middle-aged couple who had lasted 5 days and left owing him nothing but confusion. Any of them. Or someone who had used any of them. He went to the trunk. He didn't know why. Something pulled him there, the same instinct that had always made him check the fence line after a storm, the deep animal sense that something needed checking. He hadn't opened it since the funeral. Couldn't. The smell of lavender and old wood was Maggie distilled to essence, and he had not been ready for that. But tonight, in the strange silence of a house where Lily slept peacefully for the first time in half a year, he was ready. He lifted the lid. The smell rose up, lavender and cedar, and something else, something sweet and faint that he couldn't name, only feel. Her wedding dress lay folded on top, white fabric, gone slightly yellow at the edges, still holding the shape of her. A lock of her hair, dark brown, tied with a ribbon. A small, carved box that had belonged to her grandmother. And beneath it all, worn at the corners, its pages soft with use. Her journal. His hands were steady when he picked it up. Steadier than he expected. He opened it to a random page. Her handwriting small and precise. Boston schooled, the letters perfectly formed, filled the yellowed lines. He turned pages without reading, just feeling the physical presence of her words, her thoughts, the record of a life lived fully and cut too short. He found it by accident. The entry dated March 15th, 1884. 2 years before she died, over a year before Lily was born. He read it once fast, his heart accelerating. Then he read it again, slower. Today I should have died, lost in the blizzard on the Santa Fe Trail near Flagstaff. The horse threw me and ran. I could feel the cold taking everything. My fingers stopped hurting, which I knew was bad. I thought about Jackson. I thought about how he would not know for days perhaps and what that would do to him. Then she appeared, an Apache woman alone on foot. She built a fire, I don't know how, with the snow coming down the way it was. She wrapped me in furs. She stayed with me through the night, talking to me when I was drifting, pulling me back. I don't know what she said. It didn't matter. The sound of her voice was enough. Her name was Ayana Nashoba. She saved my life. And she saved the life of the child I carry inside me, though neither of us knew then if the baby would survive the cold. She asked for nothing. When I woke, she was gone. There was only a white feather on the ground beside me. Jackson, if you ever read this, find her. She is the only one I trust with our daughter. Jackson read it 3 times, his heart louder with each pass. His hands were not steady anymore. The journal shook slightly in his grip. Maggie had known. Not that she would die, she couldn't have known that, but she had known about Ayana, had thought about her enough to write it down, to leave it where he might someday find it. Find her. She is the only one I trust with our daughter. The same words she had whispered dying. He set the journal down carefully. He walked out of the cabin. Ayana was sitting by the corral, her back to him, looking up at the stars. She sat very still, in the way of someone who had learned that stillness was not absence, but a particular kind of presence. She didn't turn when he came out, but he knew she had heard him. You knew my wife. It wasn't a question. Ayana didn't turn. I saved her 2 winters ago, near Flagstaff. She was carrying Lily then, though neither of us knew if the baby would survive the cold. Why didn't you tell me? Now she looked at him. The starlight caught the edges of her face, the high cheekbones, the dark eyes that held something old and careful, and he was surprised to see something soft. Because I did not come here to collect a debt. I came because the child needs me. Because you need someone. A pause. You needed to choose me for the right reasons, not because you owed me something. Jackson stood in silence, processing. The weight in his chest, the weight that had been there since March, that he had stopped noticing because it had become simply the shape of his interior life, shifted. Not lifted, shifted. Maggie told me to find you, he said. His throat was tight. Those were her last words. Find the woman who saved me. Find Ayana for Lily. Ayana was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was low and careful. Then she guided me here. Even after death, she guided me to you. They stood together under the vast Arizona sky, 2 strangers bound by a promise made by a dying woman. Above them, the stars were vast and indifferent and beautiful, and somewhere inside the cabin, Lily slept without crying for the first time in her memory. The weight in Jackson's chest eased just slightly, not enough to call it relief, but enough to recognize that he was not perhaps as alone as he had believed. The ranch comes back to life. 3 weeks. 3 weeks was how long it took for the Thorn Ranch to begin remembering what it was supposed to be. The fence post stood straight, again white paint, fresh on the rails. The repairs done methodically from the northwest corner, working east the way a problem wants to be solved. Start at the beginning, work toward the end, don't skip the difficult sections. The barn door hung true on oiled hinges. The horses gleamed with daily brushing. The cattle, no longer neglected, had stopped their plaintive lowing and settled into the quiet contentment of animals properly fed and watered. But it was not the ranch that had changed the most. Lily was transforming. Jackson watched them from across the yard. Ayana sitting in the shade of the old oak tree, Lily in her lap. The baby laughing, a sound Jackson had almost forgotten could exist. Ayana was teaching her things: how to hold a wooden spoon, how to stack small stones without frustration, how to listen to bird calls and understand them as a kind of language. And Lily was trying to talk. Her first word had come 4 days ago, not Papa, as Jackson had quietly hoped, but Yah, her tongue wrapping imperfectly around Ayana's name. She said it constantly now, like a prayer, like a small act of faith. Jackson found himself watching Ayana too, in the way you watch a person who doesn't know they're being watched, catching the truth of them. The way she moved through the world with no wasted motion. The way she handled the horses, whispering to them in Apache, until even the most skittish stallion dropped his head and breathed out. The way she could read tracks in the dust and tell you what had passed, when, and whether it was healthy or afraid. She had skills the kind of which could not be learned from books or from schools or from any life that had not been built close to the ground. But she didn't talk about herself. Not really. Not the things that mattered. Not until that night. They sat by the fire after Lily fell asleep. Jackson with his coffee, Ayana with her hands still, for once watching the flames as if she could see something there that he could not. The first week they had worked in comfortable silence. The second week, they had talked about small things, the weather, the cattle, which fence section needed attention next. By the third week, something had loosened between them enough that Jackson felt the courage to ask the question that had been burning. "You never told me why you have no family?" The words came out before he could reconsider them. He half expected her to stand up and leave. Instead, she was quiet. A long quiet, the kind that has weight and texture. When she spoke, her voice was flat, controlled. The voice of someone recounting events that happened to someone else as a way of getting through them. "I had a family, a village. Canyon Day in the New Mexico territory near the Arizona border. My mother, Kaya, she made the best corn cakes in the territory. My father, Kuruk, he could track a deer through solid rock. My younger brother, Takakota," a pause. "He followed me everywhere I went." The fire crackled. A log shifted. 2 years ago, men came to our village, white men with guns and torches. They said we were on land that belonged to them now. Said they had paper signatures from Washington. My father refused. He had lived on that land for 40 summers. His father before him, his father before that. Jackson didn't speak. He barely breathed. They burned everything, shot anyone who ran. Another pause longer. My mother died in the fire. My father died protecting her. I survived because I was hunting in the mountains miles away. When I returned, there was nothing left but ash and bodies. "And your brother?" Iyana's jaw tightened. A small movement, the only one. "My brother survived too. Not because he was lucky, because he was with them." She looked into the fire. "Takakota led those men to our village, showed them which cabins held the elders, which held the children. He betrayed us for gold and land they promised him." Jackson stared at her. "Your own brother. Fear makes people do terrible things." Her voice had not changed. "Greed makes them do worse." "Who were these men who led them?" Iyana looked at him directly for the first time since she had started speaking. Her eyes in the firelight were very dark and very still. "A man named Silas Blackwood." The name hit Jackson like a physical blow. "The same man who came here." Not a question. "The one who wants my land." "The same." Jackson processed this, connecting things that had been separate things he had kept separate because connecting them led somewhere dark. "Blackwood tried to buy my land 3 times. The last offer came 2 weeks before Maggie got sick." Iyana turned to face him fully. The firelight cast shadows across her features, giving her face a gravity that had already held on its own. "Your wife, when she died, you said it was fever." "That's what the doctor said. Milk fever. He said these things happen to young mothers." And then he left town. 2 days after she passed, moved to California. Never said goodbye to anyone. Jackson watched her face. "Why?" Iyana was quiet. Then, "Tell me how she died, the symptoms, everything you can remember." He told her. His voice shook. It always shook when he talked about those last days, the way Maggie had been fine and then not fine, the terrible suddenness of it. The pale skin, the convulsions near the end, the way Dr. Harmon's hands had trembled as he examined her, the way he had not met Jackson's eyes. When Jackson finished, Ayana's face had gone hard as stone. "That was not fever," she said quietly. "Those symptoms, the rapid onset, the convulsions, the pale skin, that is white snake root poisoning. Someone put it in her food, her water, her medicine." A pause that stretched so long Jackson almost spoke to fill it. "Your wife was murdered, Jackson. And I think we both know who ordered it." The world tilted. He grabbed the edge of his chair. The fire swam in his vision. The coffee cup in his hand was very cold. Maggie, his Maggie. Not taken by God, not lost to nature, not a common tragedy that happened to young mothers. Murdered, deliberately killed by a man who wanted the land they had built their life on. Something shifted inside Jackson Thorne that night. The grief that had been drowning him for 6 months, formless and vast, impossible to fight, transformed into something else. Something colder. Something that had a shape, an edge, a direction. The soldier he had buried after the war stirred, clawed at the surface. He would find the truth, and when he found it, Silas Blackwood would answer for it. What the ledger had been saying. 2 days later, before he rode to Prescott to find Zeke Brennan, Jackson sat down with the ledger one final time. He had been right. 3 head of cattle, the buyer H. Crane and Associates. The dates, the amounts, it was small. Almost nothing except that it had been done without his knowledge. He thought about it differently now, with what Ayana had told him sitting like a cold stone in his chest. He thought about the 47 people who had come through the house. He thought about a man like Blackwood who owned everything around his property, who had tried 3 times to buy him out, who had apparently arranged for his wife to be murdered when buying failed. A man like that would not stop at murder. A man like that would put someone inside, someone who watched, someone who reported. Jackson went back through the list in his memory. The helpers, the workers, the people who had come and gone. He thought about which of them had lasted longest near the cattle. He thought about the young man from Tucson, Elias, his name had been, who had worked the animals for 2 full weeks before disappearing without explanation, without asking for the wages he was owed. Elias, who had arrived the week after Maggie died. Elias, who had never explained who had sent him or how he had heard about the job. Jackson closed the ledger. He would mention it to Zeke. Zeke would know what to do with it. Zeke always knew what to do with information, which was one of the reasons he had survived 63 years in the Arizona Territory, when most men didn't make 50. He saddled his horse. He told Ayanna where he was going. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in her face, not quite concern, not quite warning, something in between. Be careful what you say and to whom. Blackwood has ears in Prescott. Zeke Brennan doesn't work for anyone but himself. Then he is a rare man in this territory. She shifted Lily on her hip. The baby was watching Jackson with those big blue eyes, the ones that were so much like Maggie's, that he sometimes had to look away. Come back before dark. He rode 20 miles of hard Arizona morning, the sun climbing and the shadows shortening, the land flat and vast and indifferent in the way only desert can be, not hostile, just unconcerned. The kind of landscape that does not care whether you live or die, but will accommodate either outcome with equal equanimity. By the time he reached Prescott, he had made a decision. He was going to find out the truth about Maggie, all of it, every piece, and then he was going to do something about it. The only question was what? Ezekiel Brennan's trading post sat at the east end of Prescott's main street, a weathered building with a sign that had faded to near illegibility, the kind of place that looked like it had always been there and always would be. Zeke himself was 63, white-haired, with eyes the color of creek water, and a face that carried 40 years of desert sun without apology. They had served together in the cavalry, back when both of them believed that serving meant something, that there was a purpose behind the orders. Back before Jackson had learned better. Zeke saw his face before he got through the door. Jack, been too long. He looked again. And this is about more than supplies. Not by a long way. Inside the store, away from the morning traffic of the street, Jackson told him everything. Ayanna, her village, Canyon Day, the connection to Blackwood, the symptoms of Maggie's death, the real symptoms, stripped of the doctor's comfortable explanation and what they meant. Zeke listened without interrupting. His face grew darker with each detail. By the end, he was very still, his coffee untouched. He was quiet for a long time. Then he poured whiskey despite the hour and set a glass in front of Jackson. I was afraid of this, he said. His voice was very quiet. Jack, there are things I've heard, things I didn't want to believe. But if what you're saying is true, it all fits. What things? Zeke glanced at the door. He crossed the room and turned the lock. Came back. There's a prospector, old drunk named Samuel Pierce. He talks too much when he's liquored up. 3 months back, he told me he saw Blackwood's foreman, a mean son of a gun named Dutch Keller, buying white snake root from a Navajo woman. He paused. That was February, the month before Maggie got sick. There's more. Zeke crossed to the safe behind the counter. He opened it, took out a small leather pouch, and emptied it on the wooden surface between them. Rocks. Gray and unremarkable to Jackson's untrained eye, but Zeke handled them with the care of someone who knew what they meant. I had a geologist friend test some soil samples from around your property. These came from just north of your boundary line. He met Jackson's eyes. There's silver under your land, a major vein. Could be worth $800,000. Maybe more. Jackson heard the words. He sat with them. Everything clicked into place. The offers to buy, the refusals, the escalation. Maggie's death, all of it with the terrible elegance of a truth that had been there all along, waiting to be seen. All of it for silver. All of it for money buried in the dirt beneath the home he and Maggie had built. How many men does he have? Jackson asked. His voice was very calm. 12 guns that I know of, maybe more. Professionals, ex-army, ex-outlaws, men who kill for money and don't ask questions. Jackson finished the whiskey. Then I need more ammunition. He was almost to the door when Zeke spoke again, his voice carrying a weight that made Jackson stop. Jack, whatever you're thinking of doing, be careful. Blackwood's operated in this territory for 10 years without consequence. He has judges, marshals half the county commission in his pocket. The law isn't your friend in this. Jackson looked back at him. Then I'll find another way. When he returned to the ranch that afternoon, Ayanna was on the porch, Lily on her hip, watching the eastern ridge with the stillness of a hawk watching the ground below. Someone has been watching us, she said before he could speak. 3 times today. Movement on the ridge, a rider keeping distance. Jackson squinted at the ridge, saw nothing. Blackwood's men. Her voice was uncertain in a way that made him more uneasy than certainty would have. Or someone else. The way they move it is familiar to me. Like someone I taught to move. A pause. Your brother. She didn't answer. She just held Lily a little tighter. That night, Jackson told her what Zeke had said. The white snake root. Dutch Keller. The silver beneath their feet, a fortune neither of them had asked for, and neither of them wanted a fortune that had cost Maggie her life and had nearly cost Jackson everything else. Ayanna listened in silence. When he finished, she spoke quietly with the flatness of someone who had reached a conclusion they had been approaching for a long time. So Blackwood killed Maggie for money, killed my family for land, and now he wants to take Lily's future for silver he has no right to claim. That's about the size of it. She looked at the fire. Then we stop him. We gather evidence. We go to the law. We make sure he cannot hurt anyone else. And if the law won't help, she turned and met his eyes. Then we fight. But we try the right way first. For Lily. So she grows up knowing her father chose justice over revenge. Jackson looked at this woman who had appeared from the horizon 6 weeks ago with 5 words and changed everything. He thought about Maggie, who had written, "Find her" in a journal 2 years before she died, as if she had seen something, some future, some shape of things to come that she needed to ensure. He thought about Lily asleep upstairs, safe for the first time in months. All right, he said, we plan. The plan. Over the next 2 weeks, they built something careful. Not a plan, exactly. A plan implied a certainty about the future that neither of them was willing to claim. What they built was more like a framework, the skeleton of an intention. They would take Lily to Prescott and leave her somewhere safe. They would gather witnesses, collect statements, present what they had to. Judge Samuel Whitmore, the one honest judge left in the territory, Zeke said, though he said it the way you talk about an endangered species. Then they would let the law do what it existed to do. The doing of it would be something else. In the evenings after Lily slept, they sat by the fire and talked about Blackwood, about evidence, about what they had and what they needed. But the talking had begun to drift the way conversations do between people who are no longer strangers. It moved toward other things, older things. One night, Ayanna asked him about Maggie, not about how she died, about how she lived. Jackson was surprised by how easy it was. She was stubborn, he said, and the word came out with warmth instead of pain, the way you talk about someone's best qualities when enough time has passed. Insisted on coming west even though her family thought she'd lost her mind. Boston family, they had very specific ideas about what a life should look like, and none of those ideas involved Arizona territory. She said she wanted to see sky that went all the way to the ground. Mountains that were real mountains, not what she called the little hills of New England. She sounds brave. She was. Jackson stared into the fire. When we first started this ranch, we had nothing, just the land and each other, and a very large amount of hope that was not always justified by the facts. There were times I wanted to give up. Go back east where life was easier and the winters didn't kill you. But Maggie wouldn't hear it. She said we were building something that mattered, something that would last. And you did. We did. He looked at Ayanna. But I couldn't have kept it without you. Maggie knew that somehow. That's why her last words were about finding you. Ayanna was quiet for a moment. Perhaps she saw something. Some future she wanted to make sure would happen. She turned her cup in her hands. Do you believe in that, in seeing the future? I'm not sure what I believe. I believe some people know things they should not know. My mother was like that. She would dream of events before they happened. A pause that held the weight of what was coming. She dreamed of the fire, 3 nights before it happened. But she could not see how to stop it. Jackson looked at her. I know, she said, reading his expression. Do not say you are sorry. She lived well and loved fully. That is all any of us can hope for. He thought about Maggie, who had also loved fully, who had also lived well, and who had been taken anyway. He thought about the strange mercy of not always knowing what is coming. They sat in silence as the fire burned low. And outside, the November wind moved through the grass, and inside the house was warm. What Ayana had not said. There was something she was not telling him. He sensed it the way you sense weather, not as a specific knowledge, but as a pressure, a change in the quality of the air between them. She answered every question he asked directly and completely. She held nothing back when he asked, but there were things he had not known to ask. It came out the third week of October, 4 days before they were set to leave for Prescott. They were working the fence line on the north side of the property, the section that ran closest to the edge of the land that had been Jackson's and would presumably remain his since he had no intention of selling it, regardless of what was under it. The morning was cold, the kind that reminded you winter was a real thing and not just a rumor. Their breath made clouds. Ayana straightened from the post she had been setting, and she said without preamble, "I need to tell you something." Jackson put down his hammer. "I did not come here only because of Maggie," she said, "or only because of the child." She was looking at the mountains, not at him, the way she looked at difficult things from an angle not head-on. "I have been following Blackwood for 2 years," she said, "since Canyon Day. I have been tracking him, learning his operations, finding the people he has hurt. I needed a pause. I needed a reason that was stronger than revenge, something to justify it, something clean." She finally looked at him. "I found Lily. I found you. And what started as a reason became something real. But you should know the truth. I did not arrive here by accident." The wind moved between them. Jackson thought about it. About the woman who had appeared from the horizon with 5 words, who had known exactly where to come, who had been watching the ranch from a distance before she rode in. He thought about how she had known Blackwood's name before he had said it, how she had recognized Blackwood when he rode onto the property, and Blackwood had recognized her, and both of them had hidden it. "The ledger," he said, "the missing cattle, the name H. Crane." She nodded slowly. "H. Crane and Associates. Henry Crane is Blackwood's legal alias, the name he uses when he doesn't want to be connected to a transaction. Someone in your house was selling him information along with the cattle, reporting on your finances, your state of mind, how desperate you were. It was Elias, the hand from Tucson. He was Blackwood's man. You knew this already." "I suspected it. I confirmed it 3 days ago when I found a message hidden in the water trough." She met his eyes steadily. "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry." Jackson was quiet for a long time. Not angry, something more complicated than anger. The sense of standing in a landscape that was slightly different from the one he thought he had been standing in. Not worse necessarily, just different. "Why didn't you?" he asked. "Because I needed you to trust me for yourself. Not because I gave you good information. Not because I was useful." Something moved in her face, something rare, something she usually kept very well hidden. "I have spent 2 years being trusted only when I was useful. I wanted—" She stopped. "You wanted to be trusted as a person," he said. She looked at the mountains again. Jackson picked up his hammer. He thought about Maggie, who had also chosen him before he had earned it, who had decided on trust before she had reason for it. He thought about 47 strangers and the long, exhausting education in the cost of misplaced faith. "Thank you for telling me," he said. He went back to work. After a moment, she did too. They finished the fence line by noon. The second quiet. The week before they left for Prescott, something changed between them. Not dramatically, not in any way that announced itself, but the quality of the space between them had shifted the way the quality of light shifts as seasons change imperceptibly, until one day you notice it's different. It happened in small ways, hands touching when they passed tools, sitting a little closer by the fire. Conversations that went deeper, that found their way to hopes and fears that both of them had not said aloud to anyone. One afternoon, Lily fell asleep between them on the blanket they had spread in the shade of the oak tree. Her face relaxed and beautiful in the way sleeping children are innocent of everything they haven't yet learned to carry. Ayana was watching her. Jackson was watching Ayana watch her. "She looks like Maggie when she sleeps," he said. "Yes." A pause. "But she has your stubbornness when she's awake." He laughed softly, careful not to wake Lily. "That's Maggie's stubbornness. I just got blamed for it." Ayana smiled, not the small, controlled curve of her usual expression, but something fuller, more unguarded. He had not seen her smile like that before. It changed her face completely. Neither of them spoke for a while. The afternoon light came down golden through the oak leaves. A hawk turned lazy circles above the pasture. "What do you want?" Jackson asked eventually, "when this is over? When Blackwood's dealt with and Lily's safe, and it's just life the way it's supposed to be." Ayana was quiet. He had learned to wait in her silences. They were not empty. I want to go back to Canyon Day, she said at last. Not to live, but to say the words that were never said over the dead, to mark the place, so it is not forgotten. She touched the braid at her shoulder, a habit he had noticed when she was thinking. And I want, she stopped. What? She looked at Lily sleeping between them. I want this, she said simply. Something like this, to be part of something that is not built on grief. The words landed softly. He didn't answer them, didn't have words adequate to answer them, but he held them. He held them very carefully. Night before the road. October 15th, the night before they were to leave for Prescott. They had packed carefully. Lily's things in a small bag, the cloth animal Maggie had made, the blanket, the small tin cup. Jackson's documents, the ledger with the false entries, Maggie's journal with its crucial entry, a signed statement from Zeke about Samuel Pierce's testimony. Everything that could be used, organized in a saddlebag that would not leave his side. Lily was asleep early, exhausted from a day of helping pack in the way toddlers help pack, enthusiastically and destructively. Jackson and Ayana sat by the fire the last night, before things would begin to move, and the fire burned low and the house was quiet. Tell me about the morning it happened, Ayana said. The morning you found her. He had not talked about it. Not directly, not the morning itself, the specific texture of it, the way time had felt different. He had circled it, described it clinically when he had to, but he had not gone inside it. But he did now. I woke before she did, he said. That wasn't unusual. She slept later than me always. I came downstairs and made coffee. I heard her moving around upstairs and I thought... He stopped, steadied. I thought she was fine. There had been no sign the night before. She had seemed tired, but it was February and Lily was still young, and tired was just the weather of those months. He looked into the fire. By noon she couldn't stand. By evening she was convulsing. Dr. Harmon came out. He was there within the hour, which I remember thinking was fast, and I thought it meant something good that he had come so quickly. But his hands were shaking when he examined her. He wouldn't look at me. He gave her something, said it would help with the fever, and she seemed calmer for a little while, and I thought... He stopped again. I thought she was going to be all right, he said. I thought this was the bad part and the good part was coming. I held her hand for 2 hours. She opened her eyes once and told me to find you. His voice was very steady and very quiet. And then she was gone. Silence. Ayana did not say anything. She did not offer comfort or correction or perspective. She simply sat with him in the weight of it, and the weight was real, and she did not try to lift it. She just made it less lonely. After a long time, she said, Dr. Harmon didn't give her something to help the fever. He gave her more of the same poison. That's why she seemed calmer. The convulsions stopped near the end. Her voice was careful and level. He knew what was happening, and he chose Blackwood's money over her life. Jackson had known this intellectually since she had told him. But hearing it said plainly in this quiet room on this last night before everything changed, it hit differently. He's gone, Jackson said. California. Guilt does not let you run, Ayana said. It only makes you faster. They let the fire burn down to embers. Neither of them moved to add wood. I need to tell you something else, Ayana said. The particular weight of her voice made him look up. Tonight when I was checking the horses, the rider was back, on the ridge, closer than before. Takakota. I think so. She looked at her hands. He has been following us since I arrived, watching the house, watching Lily. She was quiet. 3 weeks ago, one of your hands told me, the older one, Barclay, he told me he had seen someone in the north pasture at dusk. An Apache man who found Lily when she had crawled under the fence and gotten into the tall grass. This man had picked her up, carried her back to the gate, set her down, and walked away before Barclay could reach him. Jackson stared at her. He didn't tell me, Ayana said, because he thought it would frighten me. He thought I didn't know the man. A pause. He was wrong about the second part. Your brother saved Lily. My brother has been watching Lily for weeks. She looked up. I don't know what that means. I don't know if I can trust it. But I know that whatever he has become, some part of him remembers what family is. Outside, the wind moved through the grass. Inside, the embers glowed. Whatever happens tomorrow, Jackson said, we handle it together. Yes, she said, together. The road. They left before dawn. 3 of them on 2 horses, Jackson with Lily strapped to his chest, the way he had carried her through the worst months, her small head against his heart. Ayana on the Appaloosa riding slightly ahead, and was her habit. Her eyes on the landscape the way his eyes went to the horizon when he thought about the future. The morning was cold and clear. The mountains to the north were pink with the first light, and the desert floor was silver with frost that would burn off by mid-morning. Somewhere out in the scrub, a coyote called once and then was silent. They made good time for the first 4 hours. Then Ayana raised her hand. Jackson pulled up beside her. She was listening, head slightly tilted in that way she had of making her whole body into an ear. Lily, as if she understood the signal, went still against Jackson's chest. Horses, Ayana said it quietly. At least 4, hidden in the rocks ahead, waiting. Jackson felt the cold settle into his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Ambush. Yes. Can we go around? She studied the terrain for a long moment. The canyon to the south, Sangre Canyon, narrow and dangerous but possible. He didn't like it. You don't go into a canyon when someone might be trying to trap you. Canyon walls are just vertical surfaces for bullets to bounce off of. But the road ahead was worse, and Lily was with them. They turned south. The canyon was exactly as Ayana had described it. Walls rising high on either side, red stone that gave it its name. The passage barely wide enough for 2 horses moving carefully. The light came down in a narrow strip above them. The horses' hooves echoed. Jackson's hand rested on the Winchester in its scabbard. They were halfway through when the shooting started. It came from above, from both rims, figures appearing at the canyon's edge, muzzle flashes in the thin morning light. Bullets struck the stone around them, chips flying, the sound enormous and reverberating in the narrow space. Jackson's horse screamed and shied. He held the reins with one hand and Lily with the other, pulling the animal forward into the narrowest section of the canyon where the walls were too close for a clear shot from directly above. Ayana was already off her horse. Her bow was in her hands. She moved to the canyon wall and used it for cover, and in one smooth motion she drew and loosed an arrow up and to the left, a screaming sound from the rim, one figure falling. She knocked another arrow before the first had landed. Jackson drew the Winchester. He fired at muzzle flashes on the rim, working methodically, the cavalry training, coming back through his hands without conscious thought. He saw one man drop. Another. But there were too many he could count, at least 6 positions above them, maybe 8, and Ayana could not cover all of them, and they were pinned with no cover except the stone itself. Then something unexpected happened. From the opposite rim, from the east, from behind Blackwood's men, new gunfire. Not at Jackson and Ayana, at the men pinning them. 2 of Blackwood's shooters pitched forward, hit from behind. 3 more turned to face the new threat and retreated from the rim. The remaining 2 scattered into the rocks above. Then silence. Jackson and Ayana waited, hearts hammering, guns still raised. Lily was completely still against Jackson's chest, not crying, not even breathing loudly. As if she too understood that silence was required. A figure appeared on the eastern rim. An Apache man, taller than Ayana but with the same high cheekbones, the same quality of stillness. He held a rifle in both hands, not aimed at them, held across his chest, the way you hold a weapon you are not intending to use. His face was painted with markings Jackson did not know how to read. Ayana stared up at him. Jackson had seen many things in her face over the past weeks. Composure, controlled grief, dry humor. The rare unguarded moments that felt like glimpses behind a curtain. But he had never seen what he saw. Now shock that broke through every layer of control, she had recognition that was also pain, a complicated and devastating collision of things that had no simple name. Takakota, she whispered. The man on the rim looked down at them for a long moment. His face gave nothing away, or gave everything away, depending on how you looked at it. Then he stepped back from the edge and disappeared into the rocks. Gone, as if he had never been there. Why, Jackson asked. Why would he save us? Ayana shook her head slowly. Her voice was not quite steady. I do not know, but I intend to find out. Prescott. They reached Prescott as the afternoon sun began its descent, coming in off the desert, with the particular exhaustion of people who have been moving fast and thinking faster, carrying a sleeping child, and the weight of what they now knew. The town had grown since Jackson had last spent real time here. Silver money and cattle drives had expanded. It pushed new buildings up along the main street, given the saloons more mirrors and the merchants more stock. But Zeke's trading post was exactly where it had always been, weathered and permanent. The sign barely legible, but the building as solid as the man who ran it. Zeke came out when he saw them. His face broke into warmth when he saw Lily, and that warmth faded when he took in their expressions. Ambush, Jackson said. 4 hours out. Someone knew we were coming. Inside, they explained quickly. Zeke held Lily against his shoulder, the baby already half asleep, while Jackson and Ayanna laid out what they had, the documents, the evidence, the plan to see Judge Whitmore. Zeke listened with the focused attention of an old soldier absorbing a briefing. "You can trust me, Jack," he said quietly. "I'll protect her with my life." "I know," Jackson said. "That's why we're here." They left Lily sleeping in the small back room, Maria Rodriguez watching over her. Maria, who had been helper number 15, the one who had walked 10 miles in the dark rather than spend another night on the ranch. She had come back 3 weeks ago, shamefaced and determined, and Jackson had let her come back because she had meant it and because shame that brings you home is not the worst thing a person can carry. Jackson and Ayanna spent the night in the back room of the trading post. They would see Judge Whitmore first thing in the morning. Jackson woke before dawn to the smell of smoke. Not campfire smoke, not cook fire smoke. Building fire smoke. He was moving before he was fully conscious. Ayanna was already up. He could hear her bootsteps on the floor ahead of him. He threw open the back room door, and the smoke hit him thick and acrid, the orange glow of flame visible through the front windows of the post. He ran. Ayanna ran. The front of the trading post was an inferno. The wooden walls had caught completely, the fire moving with the terrible efficiency of something that has found exactly the right fuel. The heat drove them back 20 feet before they could get close. Jackson raised his arm against it, looking for a way through, looking for anything. "Lily," Ayanna said one word, "everything." They ran around to the back. The flames hadn't reached the back room yet, but the smoke was heavy and moving fast. Jackson went through the back door at a run, eyes burning, and found Maria on the floor, unconscious. A cloth over her face. The sweet chemical smell told him everything. "Lily." The crib was empty. Jackson's world narrowed to a single point of cold, absolute terror. He shook Maria's shoulder hard. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, filling with tears as consciousness returned. "They took her." Her voice was barely audible. "3 men. They put something over my face and I couldn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Jackson was already moving. Back outside. Ayanna was crouched by the ground at the back corner of the building, reading the story written in the dirt with the speed of someone who had spent a lifetime learning to read it. 8 horses, she said, left heading north. 3 hours ago, maybe 4. She stood. 1 horse is carrying extra weight. Lily. He found the note nailed to the wall beside the back door, written in elegant script that was somehow the most terrifying thing about it, the careful penmanship of a man who did not feel the need to rush. "Bring the land deed to Devil's Backbone. Come alone by sunset, October 18th. Or the child dies. S.B." In the street, Zeke's body hung from a post, his chest carved with a single letter. Jackson's scream came out as something inhuman tore through the dawn air, and he moved toward the body before Ayanna caught him, held him, her grip surprising in its strength. "Jackson." Her voice was very steady, steadier than he understood how to be. "She is alive. He needs her alive. We have 2 days." He stood in the smoke, in the fire, in the unraveling of everything, and felt himself come apart at the seams, felt the grief and rage and terror combine into something that had no name, and then somehow felt something else beneath it, something that held. Ayanna's hand on his arm, the certainty in her voice. "We get her back," Ayanna said simply. "That is all we do now." He looked at the note. He looked at the burning building. He looked at the old man who had been his friend since before he knew what friendship cost. Something inside Jackson Thorne that had been barely holding together finally broke. Or maybe he would think this later, much later. Maybe it finally became whole. "All right," he said. His voice came out very quiet and very clear. "We ride." The ride. They left Prescott as the sun rose. Behind them, the trading post burned to ash. Sarah Chen and Pastor Wilson's wife carried Maria Rodriguez to the doctor's office. The young woman had woken with a headache like a railroad spike behind her eyes, and the kind of shame that makes a person fold inward. She kept saying, "I'm sorry," in a continuous loop, as if the words could undo what had happened, as if repetition could function as repair. Ahead of them, somewhere in the wilderness of Devil's Backbone, a 2-year-old girl was crying for her father. Jackson Thorne rode north with the note in his pocket and murder in his heart. And somewhere between those two facts, the note with its cold, elegant script, the murder that was not yet committed but felt inevitable. He made a decision. Not the decision to kill Silas Blackwood, which had been gathering in him for weeks, but a different one. The decision that when this was over, when Lily was safe, when it was finished, he would not become the thing Blackwood had tried to make him. Maggie's voice in his head, quiet and stubborn. "That's not who you are, Jackson. Don't let him turn you into a monster." He held on to that. It was something to hold. They pushed the horses hard. The Appaloosa ran steady and willing the way of a horse who understands urgency. Jackson's roan matched her stride. The Arizona desert rolled past them, red rock formations and dry arroyos, and the distant purple shapes of mountains, and the sun climbed, and the shadows shortened, and neither of them spoke, except when one of them needed the other to hear something. At midday, they stopped at a spring hidden among rocks, a place Ayana knew, because she seemed to know every water source in 100 miles. While the horses drank, she knelt by the mud at the water's edge and read it the way Jackson read a ledger. 8 horses came through here, 4 hours ahead of us, maybe slightly less. She studied the prints. One horse is heavier than the others. Same horse I read in Prescott. She looked up. She is alive, Jackson. And whoever is carrying her is not riding hard. They're not afraid of being followed. They think they have time. They think I'm coming alone and desperate. Yes. A pause. That's exactly what we want them to think. They mounted and rode on. An hour before sunset, with the western sky going orange and the air cooling fast, Ayana pulled up. Someone is behind us, she said, not turning. Has been since we left Prescott. One rider. Staying far back, not Blackwood's men. They wouldn't bother to be subtle. This is someone who doesn't want either of us to see them. Takakota. I think so. She urged the Appaloosa forward without another word. The cave before the storm. They made camp in a small cave as darkness fell. No fire, no light, eating jerky in silence, with the cold coming off the rock walls and the stars very bright and very far away through the cave mouth. Tomorrow was October 17th, sunset on the 18th, less than 30 hours. Jackson found sleep impossible. He lay on his bedroll and watched the dark ceiling and thought about Lily, about the specific warmth of her, the particular weight of her against his chest when she slept. The sound of her breathing, the way she had learned to say Papa with a falling inflection, like a question that was really an answer. He got up. Ayana was at the cave entrance, sitting cross-legged, a darker shape against the dark. She didn't move when he came to sit beside her. Below them and to the east, the desert was a silver-gray nothing, beautiful in the way of places that do not care about human suffering. Tell me about your village, he said, before it burned. What was it like? She was quiet for a long time. He had learned her silences. This one had a different quality from her usual considering pauses. This was the silence of someone standing at the edge of something they did not often approach. Then she spoke, softly, carefully, as if the words were fragile. In the mornings, my mother would wake before dawn to grind corn. The sound of the grinding stone was how we knew the day had begun. My father would check the horses, speaking to them in the old language. Takakota would try to sleep longer. A small, involuntary catch. And I would pull him from his blankets. He always pretended to be angry about it. He never was. Jackson listened. We had a good life, simple. We hunted. We grew what we could in that rocky soil. We told stories around the fire at night, the elders teaching the old ways, songs and prayers that our ancestors had kept alive for generations, the same ones their grandparents had learned. The kind of knowledge that only exists as long as someone carries it. A pause. The stars turned slowly above them. What happened to the others? The ones who survived. Ayana's jaw tightened. There were no others. 60 people lived in that village. 60 people died that night. I am the only one who lived. Me and Takakota, who might as well be dead. She looked at the desert. I am the last person alive who knows my mother's name in the old language. The last person who remembers the prayer she said at sunrise. When I die, that prayer dies with me. Jackson didn't speak. He sat with the weight of that, the weight of being the last vessel for something that deserved to outlast you. Do not be sorry, she said, reading his silence. Be angry. Anger is what will get Lily back. Sorrow can wait until she is safe in your arms. He nodded. He felt both, and he let them sit together, which was the only honest way to feel them. Just before dawn, Ayana's hand closed on his arm. One figure moving toward them from the dark. No attempt at concealment, moving openly, the way someone moves when they want you to know they're coming, when surprise is the last thing they want. An Apache man. Taller than Ayana, but with the same bones, the same quality of attention in the eyes. He stopped 20 feet from the cave entrance and stood with his rifle held loosely across his body, pointed at nothing. Sister, he said. The word was almost unrecognizable. It had been pressed so flat under the weight of what came after it all, the history and betrayal and grief and years of knowing what you had done. Takakota, Ayana said. She stood but did not move toward him. For a long moment, siblings looked at each other across 20 feet of dark desert air, across 2 years of absence, across the ghost of 60 people. I knew you would come, Takakota said. I have been watching. You saved us in the canyon. Her voice held neither warmth nor coldness. It held only the question. Because I have made many wrong choices. He looked at the ground, then back up. I thought perhaps I could make one right one. You led them to our village. Our mother and our father are dead because of you. I know. His voice roughened. I know what I did. I live with it every day. The gold Blackwood promised, I spent it on whiskey trying to forget. The land he promised, I never received it. He lied, and I was a fool who did not see it until it was too late. But I should have seen it. That is the part I cannot make peace with. And now you want redemption. No. He shook his head. What I did cannot be redeemed, but I can help you save that child. His eyes moved briefly to Jackson, then back to his sister. And maybe when Blackwood is dead, I can know that some justice exists in this world, even for people like me. Jackson stepped forward. Where are they keeping her? Main cabin in a box canyon, one way and one way out. 10 men. Blackwood is expecting you at noon today, coming in alone, broken by grief. He plans to take the deed, kill you, and keep the child to ensure no one asks questions about your death. Ayana was quiet, studying her brother. The quality of that silence was different from her usual ones. It held everything. Why should we trust you? She asked finally. Takakota met her eyes. Something moved in his face, a decade of self-hatred, a decade of running, compressed into a moment and then released. Because I have nothing left to lose. Because I am already dead inside. He stopped, started again. Because I watched you with that child and with that man, and I remembered what our mother looked like when she held us. I remembered what family felt like before I burned it to the ground. The silence between siblings stretched. It held everything that had no words, all the love that had turned to betrayal and had turned to grief and had sat for 2 years in the dark, waiting to see if it would turn into anything else. If you betray us again, brother, Ayana said quietly, I will kill you myself. I would expect nothing less, sister. Devil's Backbone. Dawn over Devil's Backbone was the color of old blood. The rock formation stood in twisted shapes against the lightning sky, natural sculpture that looked deliberate, intentional, as if the earth had been trying to express something and had chosen forms that the living might interpret as warning. Canyons cut deep into the red rock, their shadows absolute and cold. This was a place designed for the hiding of things. They had 3 hours before Jackson was expected. Ayana had drawn it in the dirt before dawn. The box canyon, one entrance, one exit with the main camp at the far end. The back wall of the canyon was high but not vertical. There was a route, difficult, dangerous, the kind of route that people who were not Apache did not generally know existed. Ayana and Takakota had climbed it as children. You approach from the front, Ayana said to Jackson. Let them see you coming. Let them think you are alone and desperate. Let Blackwood believe he is in control of every variable. Her voice was steady with the practiced calm of someone who has spent 2 years planning for a moment like this. While his attention is on you, I come in from behind. That could get you killed. Everything we do could get us killed. She met his eyes. But Lily needs her father to walk through that gate. I need to be somewhere they are not looking. And me, Takakota said. You know those rocks better than anyone they would hire. Find a position. Keep Blackwood's men from flanking Jackson. Takakota nodded once. If you put us in a position to be killed, Ayana began. Then die first, he said. I know. They separated in the pale morning light. Jackson rode the main trail. Ayana went wide, circling the canyon, beginning the long climb up the back wall. Takakota dissolved into the rocks like smoke. Jackson rode slowly. He had plenty of time to think. He thought about Maggie, about her voice, the actual sound of it, which was fading in a way that terrified him, the way all specific details fade with time, regardless of how desperately you hold them. He thought about the ledger that had started this, the small, careful falsification that had led to this moment. He thought about a man like Blackwood, who had built an empire on the systematic destruction of the people around him, not from hatred, not from madness, but from simple arithmetic. They had something he wanted. They were therefore obstacles to be removed. The camp appeared ahead. A box canyon exactly as Takakota had described. Red walls rising high on 3 sides, the narrow entrance where Jackson now rode, and at the far end a cluster of buildings, horses in a corral, men visible as small shapes in the morning light. Jackson straightened in the saddle. He rode in open hands, visible, moving at a walk. He wanted them to see him coming. He wanted them to see a man who had done exactly what he was told, who had swallowed his pride and his grief and his rage and come with the deed to his land because he had no other choice. He wanted Silas Blackwood to feel safe. Mr. Thorne? Blackwood walked out from the central cabin with the easy confidence of a man on his own property, which Jackson noted he believed this to be. The silver watch chain caught the sun. The cold smile was exactly as Jackson remembered it. I'm pleased you could be reasonable. Jackson stopped his horse, kept his hands in view, let his eyes go to the cabin door. Where is she? Show me Lily first. Prove she's alive. Blackwood nodded to someone behind him. A woman emerged from the cabin, older, hard-faced, the kind of woman who worked for men like Blackwood because they stopped asking questions. In her arms, a small, blonde child in a pink dress. Lily. She looked scared but unhurt. When she saw Jackson, she reached out both hands. Papa. The word came out as a sob. Every muscle in Jackson's body screamed at him to move, to charge forward, grab her, run. He held himself still with everything he had. Throw down the deed, Blackwood said. Jackson pulled the rolled document from his saddlebag, held it up, tossed it onto the ground between them. Now let her go. Blackwood's smile widened. I don't think so. You see, Mr. Thorne, you remain a problem. You know too much about your wife, about certain other incidents. Dead men tell no tales. He drew his pistol. Jackson was already moving. 3 years of cavalry training do not leave you. They sit in the body waiting. His hand went to the Colt, drew and fired in one motion that required no thought. 2 of Blackwood's flanking men dropped before anyone understood what had happened. Chaos erupted. Jackson dove from his horse, rolled behind a boulder. Bullets struck the stone around him, chips flying. His mind went cold and clear, the battlefield clarity that had once kept him alive and now kept him focused. He fired at muzzle flashes. He saw one man fall, then another. From above, from the briny wall of the canyon, an arrow cut the air. Then another, then 3 in rapid succession. Ayanna from her height with angles that gave her shots none of the camp's defenders could anticipate. 3 men went down before they identified the source of the attack. From the east side of the canyon walls, rifle fire. Takakota keeping his word, moving between positions, keeping Blackwood's remaining men from massing. Jackson burst from cover and ran. He ran toward the cabin. Dutch Keller, Blackwood's foreman, a big man with a face like a closed fist, who came through the door, swinging a rifle like a club. Jackson ducked under it, drove his knife into the man's side, kept moving. Keller went down. Inside the cabin, the woman who had been holding Lily stood frozen. The child was still in her arms, crying properly. Now the full-volume protest of a child who understood something bad was happening, even if not what. Jackson's gun was up. His voice came out completely level. Give her to me or die, your choice. The woman thrust Lily forward. Jackson holstered the Colt in one motion and took his daughter, pulled her against his chest, felt her small heart hammering against his, felt her hands grip his shirt with the desperate strength of someone who had been waiting for this and would not let go. Papa, sobbing into his collar. Papa, 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 I've got you, baby. His voice broke on it. I've got you. It's over. You're safe. Outside, the gunfire was dying. He came back out to find the camp in wreckage. 7 of Blackwood's men were dead or dying. 2 had fled into the desert. 1 sat with his hands raised, begging loudly for mercy that he had not considered offering anyone. But Blackwood was not among the fallen. He's not here, Jackson called. He's here. Ayanna's voice from across the compound. He's just hiding. And then from the shadows of the barn, right here. They turned. Silas Blackwood stood with his gun raised, not at Jackson, not at Ayanna, at Lily. The gun was 3 feet from his daughter's head, and the look on Blackwood's face was the look of a man who had done this calculation many times and knew exactly which variable mattered. Put the child down, he said calmly. Both of you, weapons on the ground. The Colt hit the dirt. Ayanna's bow and knives followed. Better. Blackwood kept his gun steady. You really thought you could beat me in my own territory with my own men. Those men didn't help much, Jackson said. Buying time, thinking. Hired hands, replaceable. He moved his pistol, slightly not aimed at Lily, but ready to be. Unlike you, unlike that squaw beside you, unlike that little girl who's going to grow up without her father. He raised the gun. Perhaps I start with her. Then he should have warned you better. The voice came from behind Blackwood. From the shadow at the barn's edge, Takakota stepped out with his rifle trained at the back of Blackwood's head. His voice was steady, His eyes held decades. Blackwood spun halfway. You were supposed to betray my sister again. A pause. I have betrayed everyone I loved once. I will not do it again. Blackwood's gun swung toward Takakota. Four things happened in the span of a heartbeat. Ayanna dove for her knife. Jackson lunged sideways, pulling Lily with him, putting his body between his daughter and the gun. Takakota fired, and Blackwood, faster than any of them expected, fired at the same moment. Takakota's bullet caught Blackwood in the shoulder. Blackwood's bullet caught Takakota in the chest, high on the right side, spinning him. Ayanna's thrown knife buried itself in Blackwood's gun hand. His pistol fell to the dirt. Jackson scooped up his Colt from the ground with his free hand and fired twice center mass. Blackwood staggered backward and fell and lay still. The canyon went quiet. Absolute, complete quiet, except for the sound of breathing and the last few distant echoes of gunfire rolling off the rock walls and Lily making small sounds against Jackson's shoulder. Then Ayanna made a sound he had never heard from her before. She was kneeling beside her brother. Takakota lay on his back in the red dust. Blood darkened his shirt at the chest. His eyes were open and he was still breathing, but the breath came in the wrong rhythm, the hitching, effortful rhythm of a body working very hard at something that should not require effort. Takakota. Her voice had come undone. All the control she kept so carefully was simply gone, dissolved, and what was underneath it was just a woman and her brother and the terrible math of too late. Sister. His voice came out in fragments. I am sorry for everything, for the village, for mother, for father. He paused, gathering breath. I was afraid. Blackwood said he would kill me if I refused. Said he would give me everything if I helped. I was weak. Another pause, shorter. I was weak. Why did you follow us? Why did you save us? He looked at her with eyes that were growing distant, but were not yet gone. Because I watched you, these weeks. With that child, with that man. I watched you build something from ashes. Tears on his face tracking through the dust, making clean lines. It reminded me of Mother, of how she made our home feel safe. He stopped, tried again. I wanted to feel that again, to be part of something not built on blood. You betrayed our family, our people. I know, barely audible. I cannot undo what I did, but I could choose differently at the end. I could choose you, choose the man who protects you, choose the child who deserves to grow up. His eyes were losing focus. Mother, he whispered. The word like a child's. Would she have forgiven me? A pause so long it seemed like the last one. Even if it is a lie, I need to hear it. Ayanna was still for a long moment. The sun was high above the canyon. The red walls stood in silence. Everything waited. When she spoke, her voice was very tender. She would have forgiven you. She forgave everyone, even those who did not deserve it. A pause. Especially them. The ghost of something crossed his face. The ghost of relief of a weight finally set down. Thank you, sister. His hand went slack in hers. Ayanna sat with him for a long time. Jackson stood with Lily, his daughter's face pressed against his shoulder, protecting her from the sight of death. He held her and watched Ayanna and did not speak. Finally, Ayanna reached out and closed her brother's eyes. She spoke words in Apache that Jackson could not understand but did not need to prayer, in farewell, in grief, in love, all carried in a language he did not know but could feel the shape of. When she stood and turned to face Jackson and Lily, there was something in her face that might have been peace. Not the peace of resolution or relief, something older, more complicated. The peace of having done everything you could and having been there at the end and having given the last mercy. It is finished, she said. After, they buried Takakota on a hill overlooking the canyon. Ayanna sang the death songs their mother had taught them. Jackson stood beside her with Lily quiet in his arms, bearing witness. He didn't understand the words. He didn't need to. 3 days later, they rode into Prescott openly in daylight with Father Ali, beside them the white-haired priest who had sheltered them at the mission, whose presence said these people have done nothing to hide. Behind them, the bodies of Silas Blackwood and his men had been dealt with by the sheriff who had received Father Ali's message and done his job. The inquiry was held October 25th. Dutch Keller, wounded and diminished, confessed everything: the white snake route, Dr. Harmon, the conspiracy, the timeline, that matched Blackwood's final offer to buy, and Maggie's death to within a fortnight. Judge Whitmore's gavel fell. Justice, however, late arrived. The months that followed had a different quality from anything that had come before. Not because they were easy, they were not easy. The ranch needed work. The memorial for Ayana's village needed planning. The legal untangling of Blackwood's empire took time and patience and many rides to Prescott. Dutch Keller was hanged on November 24th in a proceeding that gave Jackson no satisfaction and no grief, only the cold completion of a necessary thing. But the quality of the days was different. December brought the first snow. Lily had never seen it. Ayana took her outside in the first light of morning and showed her how to catch flakes on her tongue, how to make patterns in the white powder, how to stand still in falling snow and let it change the world around you. Jackson watched from the porch with coffee warming his hands and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but something in the same family, something close enough that happiness seemed for the first time like a direction rather than a destination. Morningbird came in December. She was perhaps 50, silver-threaded, through black hair, with sharp eyes that cataloged Jackson within 30 seconds of meeting him and then apparently decided he would do. She stayed 3 days, told stories of young Ayana around the fire. Ayana, the serious child Ayana who studied, while others played Ayana, whose mother had worried she did not know how to be young. And before she left, she pulled Jackson aside. "You care for her," she said, "not a question." "I do." "Then care well. She has been hurt enough for 10 lifetimes. If you add to that hurt, her people will know." A pause. "We take care of our own." "I understand." He met her eyes steadily. "I would die before I hurt her." "Good, then we understand each other." In the evenings after Lily slept, they sat by the fire as they had through all the months, Jackson with his coffee, Ayana with her hand still. The silence between them had changed. It had become the silence of people who have been through hell together and come out the other side and know it and are not going to waste what that means. One night in late December with the fire burning low, and the December wind doing its work outside and the house warm and quiet, Jackson set down his cup and looked at this woman who had arrived from the horizon with 5 words and changed the shape of everything. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "As have I," she said. "This ranch is supposed to be Lily's inheritance, but it's too much for one person. I learned that the hard way." "You are not one person anymore." "No." He looked at her. "I'm not, and I don't want to be." He stopped to reach for words that had never been easy for him. "Ayana, I know it's only been a few months. I know some people would say it's too soon, but I need you to know that you're not just help to me. You're not just Lily's caretaker. She saved him from having to find it. "I am home," she said simply. "For the first time since the fire, I am home. This place, Lily, you." She turned and met his eyes. "This is where I belong." "Then stay. Not just for now, for always. Be part of this family. Help me raise Lily. Help me build something that lasts." "I already planned to," she said. "Did you think I would leave?" He laughed, the real sound of it, with his whole chest. "I guess I needed to hear myself asked to make it official." "Then it is official." Her dark eyes reflected firelight, and in them he saw something he recognized, the look of someone who has stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I am here. I am staying. Whatever comes, we face it together." Canyon Day. In May, when the desert bloomed, they went to Canyon Day. They took Lily. She was nearly 2.5 now, old enough to remember. Old enough to feel the weight of where they were going, even if she could not name it. Ayana led them along paths only she knew well, routes her people had traveled for generations. Each night she told Lily stories about a grandmother who made corn cakes, about a grandfather who could track a deer through solid rock, about a people who had loved a harsh land and made it beautiful. When they reached Canyon Day, Jackson understood why her people had chosen it. Red rock walls soaring hundreds of feet, ancient dwellings in the cliff faces, a stream at the canyon bottom, life-giving water in a desert that offered nothing easily. And there, in a widening of the canyon floor, the remains of the village. Not much the fire had been thorough, but Jackson could see where homes had stood, where the central gathering place had been, where children had run. Ayana dismounted slowly. She stood for a long time. Then she began to sing. She sang for an hour. The death song, the farewell. Jackson held Lily, who had gone solemn and still in the way of very young children who understand that something large is happening, even when they don't understand what. When the singing was done, Ayana walked to the center of the village. She set out cornmeal, tobacco, a white feather. She spoke words in her language, then switched to English for Jackson. He understood, so he would know. Mother, father, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, children who never grew old. I am here. I have not forgotten. I will never forget. She paused. You were murdered for land you loved, but the man who ordered it is dead now. Justice has been served. Not perfectly, justice never is, but truly. And this land is ours again. Yours, mine, our people's. No one can take it away now. She touched the eagle feather necklace Jackson had given her in February. Silver worked into the shape of a feather made by a craftsman who knew what the symbol meant. I do not live here anymore. I have found a new home with a good man and a child who needs me. But I carry you with me, in my heart, in my memories, in the stories I will tell Lily about where she comes from, all of where she comes from. The smoke rose straight up in the still air. You are not forgotten. You never will be. A pause. Rest now. I am healing. Jackson felt tears on his face. Lily reached up and touched his cheek, puzzled. Papa sad? Yes, baby. But it's the good kind of sad, the kind that heals. She thought about this with the gravity of the very young, then nodded as if it made complete sense. July. He asked her under the oak tree, the same tree where she had first made Lily laugh the first day. Lily was napping inside. The ranch hands were checking fences. The afternoon was very hot and very still, and they were sitting in the shade, and Jackson pulled out the ring he had been carrying for weeks. Simple silver with a turquoise stone made by the same craftsman, part of the same set as the necklace he had given her in February. He said what he had to say. About Maggie, whom he would always love and never replace. About Lily, who needed a mother and who had chosen this woman with a certainty that transcended anything Jackson himself could have decided. About the future, not a future built on grief or silver or land, but on something smaller and more durable. I'm not asking you to replace Maggie, he said. No one can, but I'm asking you to build something new with me. To be my wife, to be Lily's mother, to be my partner in every way for the rest of our lives. Ayanna looked at the ring for a long time. I lost everything once, she said quietly. My family, my home, my entire world. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, defined by what I had lost, carrying it like a weight that never lightened. A pause. Then I found you, found Lily, found a new family built on choice rather than blood. She reached out and touched his face with both hands gently, the way you touch something you are not sure is real yet. Yes, Jackson Thorne, I will marry you. I will be your wife. I will be Lily's mother. I will build this future with you, whatever it holds. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. August, they married at Canyon Day. It had been Ayanna's idea, not the church in Prescott, not the ranch, but here on the land of her ancestors where the names of the dead were carved in new stone on a circular wall that Jackson had helped build through the spring and summer. Sacred ground made sacred again. Father Ali presided. Morning Bird spoke blessings in Apache. The whole community came ranchers and shopkeepers, Apache elders and white settlers, people who had suffered under Blackwood, and people who had simply heard the story and wanted to bear witness. They filled the canyon floor and stood in the afternoon light. Judge Whitmore walked Ayanna down the aisle. She had no father to do it, and he was the man who had given her family its justice, which was a different kind of fathering, but not nothing. As he walked beside her, he leaned over and said something quiet. She smiled fully, completely, the smile Jackson had first seen under the oak tree that afternoon with Lily, the smile that changed her face entirely. What did he say? Jackson asked her afterward. That Maggie would have approved, she said, that she is looking down and smiling. Jackson thought about a woman who had written "Find Her" in a journal 2 years before she needed him to, who had trusted a future she could not see, who had loved well and died fighting for the people she loved. She's smiling, he thought, and so am I. Lily served as flower girl, taking the responsibility with utmost seriousness, scattering petals from a basket that Morning Bird had woven, singing a song to herself that was half English and half Apache, the private language she had invented for herself, the language of a child who had grown up between two worlds and claimed both. As the sun went down behind the canyon walls, painting everything gold, Jackson stood with his wife beside him and looked at the circular memorial wall, the carved names of 60 people who had not been forgotten, would not be forgotten, whose deaths had been answered and whose land had been reclaimed, and felt the strange, complicated completeness of a thing that was over and also beginning. A year ago, he said, I was a broken man, grieving alone. I couldn't see past the next day. He looked at her. If someone had told me I'd be standing here, a year ago, she said, I was a ghost, living but not alive, moving through the world but not part of it. She looked around at the canyon walls, at the carved names, at Lily dancing with Morningbird, among the scattered petals, at the friends who had come from across the territory to be here. Now I am home. We both are. Behind them, the celebration continued. Lily's laughter rang out clear and bright, carrying up the canyon walls to wherever the dead could hear. The stars emerged one by one, filling the Arizona sky, the same stars that had looked down on all of this, the grief and the love and the terrible cost and the slow, stubborn recovery. Ancient and eternal and beautifully indifferent to human suffering, and yet somehow present at all the right moments. Jackson pulled Ayanna close. She rested her head against his shoulder. Ready to go home, Mrs. Thorne. She smiled. Always. Home is wherever we are together. And hand in hand, they walked back into the celebration, back into life, back into the future they were making one day at a time. A future built not on silver or revenge or the things that can be taken away, built on the simple and undefeatable fact of choosing each other, built on love. Now I am here. 5 words spoken on a September morning in 1886 that changed 2 lives, saved 1 small girl, and proved what all true stories prove, that family is not only what you are born into. It is what you choose, what you build, what you fight for, what you carry forward into the light. If this story moved you, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and we'll see you in the next one.